Taxpayers, you can expect a tax increase of some kind. What is it going to look like? Is it going to be a tax on retail delivery? Is it going to be a tax on Uber and Lyft? Is it going to be some kind of environmental fee? Not sure yet, but details still being hashed out behind closed doors as Democrats try to drum up the votes in order to get a revenue stream for the fiscal cliff of the Regional Transit Authority. Now, this is Illinois in Focus Daily. We are in the throes of fall veto session, final few days here, as we've got a lot of activity expected. And legislators in these final 3 days of the calendar year, they've got a tall order. Everything from the idea of the transit cliff to how they're going to handle immigration policy, which we'll touch on in another segment, and even questions of a governor veto. Will we see one of those overridden before the end of the week? Still uncertain, but clearly there's a ton to tackle, and other things as well, energy. So taxpayers, you could find out when you wake up Friday morning that there was a tax increase to fund the fiscal cliff, and there was an omnibus energy package, and that's energy legislation that includes a whole bunch of stuff. Could that mean your rates for your energy is going to increase? These are the debates they're having at the State House. But let's go ahead and get on into it with Senate Minority Leader John Curran and State Senator Sue Rezin, Republicans. They held a news conference talking about how they believe Democrats are going to hinder the economy further by their actions of looking to increase taxes to fund the transit fiscal cliff. Here is Senator Curran discussing that yesterday.
Reform first. It does not make logical sense to, at the same time, you're going to put a bunch of reforms in place and put a new group of people in charge to also, you don't know exactly what you need. We know the cliff keeps getting pushed out. We know the amount keeps coming down. Let's put the new people in first. Let's reform the structures. Let them get their arms around it, and then let's talk about what is needed.
Now, State Senator Mike Simmons was at a separate news conference where he discussed the need for, he says, a modern transportation system, and he's pushing for what the Senate passed in May. Now, if you were following us back in May, it was the tail end of regular scheduled session where they had to get a budget in place, and it seems like there's always a last-minute push to get the budget in place. But there was also a measure out of the Senate that increased taxes, $1.5 billion, including that $1.50 retail delivery tax. So the Senate passed that, and then the House, they never picked it up. Since then, we've heard people in the House complain about the possibility of raising taxes. Democrats saying that they don't like the idea of raising taxes. But how are they going to fund this fiscal cliff? Mike Simmons sharing that this is something that he believes must happen.
This is a smart investment, not just for transit, but also for our local economy. And there have been endless studies from Cranes and other sources that make the case that investing in public transit to the tune of $1.5 million is how we take our economy forward, not backwards in this region.
Governor J.B. Pritzker also yesterday being asked about the possibility of tax increases, and he said it's hard to find new revenue streams.
The House of Representatives has been meeting to determine what it is that they could tolerate. Nobody wants to, revenue is always hard to raise for anything, even when you know it's hyper important. And so they're still considering what those things are. I've tried to be careful about what I've told them because I want to make sure that they are considering all the options. And then, from my perspective, what I want to make sure happens is that we end up with a world-class transit system for the whole state.
But what does that look like when it comes to the funding aspect? Again, the Republicans pushing back on this idea altogether.
This process, called decoupling, not only prevents taxpayers from what would be automatic savings,
well, and we'll get to
but
that.
It also makes.
We'll get to that here in a moment. That was John Curran talking about yet another tax increase that could come before the end of the year. and that is decoupling from the federal tax changes. But back to the Transit Authority. So you heard Kern earlier say that he wants reforms before we start throwing money at the Regional Transit Authority. We're talking Chicago Transit Authority, Metra, PACE, RTA. But the bill that the Senate passed that had that $1.50 retail tax, it also had $200 million going to downstate regional transit. So they, making the argument that this isn't, the entire state paying just for Chicago transits. It's the entire state paying for all kinds of mass transits. But Simmons, I asked him about the management of this because the Republicans are saying we can't continue to throw money at an organization that's already gotten a ton of money. What are they doing with the money? They've had increased funds for years. Is it new programs that were used with temporary dollars, or are they, just paying exorbitant amounts with inefficient systems in place? Simmons says that the management side of this is important, but he says that there needs to be that funding stream.
Well, the legislation that the Senate passed, House Bill 3438, includes reforms. We think, to be really clear, the reforms are just as important as the funding. I don't think you want one without the other. So I personally would not have supported legislation that has funding with no reforms, and vice versa. The thing we really have to do is do both at the same time. And so the reforms that are captured in this legislation would expand the governance so that you have a more unified set of oversight systems across all the counties. It's giving the different counties that oversee these public transit systems equal voice in terms of the decisions that are made and how decisions get signed off on in terms of infrastructure investments, in terms of service frequency, in terms of the efficiency of those services. And that's a step forward, right? We got to have those reforms if we're going to really meet the moment for our public transit systems. And that was accomplished in the legislation that the Senate passed in May, and that we're hopeful that the House will take up and pass this week.
And again, that legislation, months old now, a lot of discussion had about how to fund regional transit. But I asked Simmons, listen, taxpayers wake up at the end of every session you guys are in and they read the newspaper or they listen to this program and they find out that there's another tax increase. How many more tax increases can they take? Here's Simmons. More efficiencies.
Well, we built a lot of efficiencies into the legislation that the Senate passed, so I want to be real clear on that. Look, my generation, I got to the Senate in 2021. We do the work. We come in with revenue ideas. We don't just spend and kick the can down for the next generation the way the generation did before us. We have in the Illinois Senate and the Illinois General Assembly, we have passed balanced budgets every year that I've been in this building, and that's been since 2021. And I think that's a testament to the governor. That's a testament to my colleagues that understand the importance of being responsible fiscal stewards of taxpayers' dollars. That said, the efficiencies are in the legislation that the Senate passed in May. And those are going to help us to run systems that are better coordinated, with better universal fare systems, with more efficient schedules both for our rank and file riders, but also for a corporate CEO who's trying to get to work, right? We want them to be able to use public transit too. And so you need systems that actually work. And so the efficiencies are there. In terms of the revenue, it's time to talk about this in terms of what it actually is. Are we asking regular folks to pay more taxes? No. Are we asking Facebook, Amazon, and big corporations to put a little bit more skin in the game? Yes, I think it's well overdue that we do that. And I feel that the reason I supported the legislation we supported in May is because it is equitably structured so that the bigger corporations have to put a little bit more skin in the game. Now, if they're passing the buck down to rank and file problems, that's a problem, and we ought to talk about that. But this has been done in a way that is fiscally responsible, and that can be accomplished this week.
And you heard him talking about how he wanted Amazon and other retailers to pay that surcharge, that $1.50 surcharge, and that was at least his intent in voting for it out of the Senate in May. But everybody's seeing that as, well, that's just going to be passed down to the consumer. And something with tax policy and economists, they say, businesses never really pay the tax because they just push that down onto the consumer to ultimately pay that. So we'll see how that shakes out, but State Senator Sue Rezin was very passionate about pushing back on this idea of the transit tax because taxpayers can't afford it.
Well, first of all, if you look for the past 7 years, we've added $1.3 billion from the capital bill that was supposed to go to roads and bridges in our districts, but instead went for operating expenses for the CTA. So clearly, they're operating at a deficit, and they haven't changed their business model and why they're in a deficit. On top of that, they are asking for all of these new taxes throughout the entire state. We don't use the system. Why should downstate and central Illinois pay a new fee on every package delivered at our house? Many people rely on the ability to receive their goods at their house because they don't have access to transportation. So they're having packages delivered, whether it's baby diapers or formula, delivered at their house. So this new tax is only starting, I don't know what it is, at $1 or $1.50, but the door's open, right? It's a new tax, and every year when we need more money for the CTA in Chicago, all they have to do is raise that tax.
So residents saying that this really opens the door for that tax to come back again and again and again to where they raise it. But that's not the only tax issue that could come up. Senate Minority Leader John Curran talked about how Democrats are looking to decouple Illinois' tax from the federal tax under the Trump administration with the big, beautiful
If the Democrats are serious about improving Illinois' economic growth, they will start with making the difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions with constraining state spending, reducing taxes, and improving Illinois' economic environment for all Illinoisans. Every time Democrats run into a cash problem, they make matters worse by reaching further into the pockets of Illinois families who can't afford it. One short-sighted cash grab we are expecting the Democratic majority to use this veto session is decoupling from some of the newly passed federal tax benefits so they can squeeze a few more dollars out of our already struggling Illinois businesses. Like many states, in Illinois, federal tax savings are passed on automatically to our taxpayers unless we pass legislation to proactively opt out. This process, called decoupling, not only prevents taxpayers from what would be automatic savings, but it also makes tax filing more complicated for Illinoisans, leading to audit issues. The Democrats' plan is to increase taxes on the economic engines of our state, while at the same time making taxes more complicated for Illinoisans.
So we're looking at the possibility of the transit tax. We're also looking at the possibility of businesses having to learn how to balance a decoupled Illinois taxing scheme to what the federal taxing scheme is. And this is all something that could happen before the end of the day Thursday, or maybe even into the early morning hours Friday. We'll be there at this Capitol to keep you posted. Go to thecentersquare.com and stay up to date with those headlines. But again, that's not the only area you could see some cost increases. You could possibly also see some cost increases from an energy omnibus bill where everybody knows that energy prices have skyrocketed. And it's burdensome for families. It's burdensome for businesses, especially manufacturers. Manufacturers Association earlier this week held a news conference blasting the legislation, but environmental groups, they are saying that this legislation is needed. And Democrats held a news conference with some of these environmental groups. And State Representative Jay Hoffman, he said that everybody knows energy is high, and this legislation that would tack on another fee onto utility bills to help subsidize battery storage. And it has a whole host of other components in there. And you've got Republicans countering, saying that that is not the way to go, doubling down on energy that's not reliable and too expensive is going to only increase costs. But here's Hoffman talking about what he says is the need for this particular piece of legislation to subsidize battery storage.
The issue of energy capacity here in Illinois. The spikes that we have seen beginning in June on the customers' bills is unacceptable. We have to act, and we have to act today, and we have to act tomorrow and get this through this veto session, because we can't go through another summer of these horrendous spikes in electricity bills. This will address that. It was mentioned that this will provide $13 billion in net benefits to the customers. That's residential customers, that's manufacturing customers as well.
So you've got Hoffman talking about how he believes it's going to bring about savings, but are those savings really going to be realized? You've got others talking about this, including State Senator Sue Rezin, who is adamantly opposed to the idea of this bill increasing the rates for ratepayers in Illinois.
Now, I watched the previous press conference. They blamed it on several things. I will tell you why your prices are going up. Because capacity is being forced offline. Natural gas plants in the state are being forced offline. Natural gas is the cheapest way to provide capacity, which is what we need because of the new economy, the AI economy that you hear about. We all agree that we need more power. I agree with my colleagues that just spoke. Many states are looking at how to solve this problem. The difference is, in all of the other states that they mentioned, they're building out natural gas combined cycle plants to be able to power their data centers. They're not doubling down on expensive renewable power, such as wind and solar, and now battery, and transmission lines built in to move the power from another state from wind and solar that are paid by ratepayers.
So you've got, again, the ongoing questions of how exactly all of this is going to be paid for. The Citizens Utility Board was there, and they were with the Democrats pushing for this legislation, saying it's important that this legislation get passed so that they can have that new form of energy moving forward, but all of this under the guise of decarbonization, which is getting rid of natural gas and coal-fired power plants. But Cub saying that this bill is important.
As we in Illinois face soaring electric bills, market architects applaud these high price outcomes for sending strong market signals. Well, then, it's time for our state to respond to these signals and act now to protect Illinois consumers. SB 25 gives us the tools to do that. These tools, such as energy efficiency, battery storage, virtual power plants, and optional time of use rates, can work on a system-wide level to cost-effectively help us avoid electric price volatility. But they're also tools that regular residential electric customers can deploy at home to take control of their own energy bills.
What is all this going to look like on your energy bill for businesses, for families, resin
This
countering?
bill was written by special interest groups and rubber stamped by the governor's administration, leaving Illinois families to pay the price. It lifts the caps that protect consumers, hands sweeping new powers to unelected regulators, and doubles down on unreliable energy sources that simply cannot sustain our state's power needs. This proposal will lead to higher electric bills, less reliability, and fewer options for families and manufacturers alike.
And Rezin continued to talk about the energy needs in the states and how this bill is the wrong path.
Are financed by ratepayers. Why is that? Because that's the best gig in the world. They get to finance projects that are paid for by ratepayers. They, of course, can go out and bond that kind of money. We all want that kind of financing, but we don't get it.
And this is all, again, is something that could happen before the end of session come Thursday evening, or I hope it's not early Friday morning. But regardless, the Center Square will be on the ground there reporting to you, and you can find those headlines in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up for that newsletter today.